So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for joining us in another coffee break special edition on Water Mythbusters of the Permanent Forum of Binational Waters, of course. And as always, we want to thank our sponsors: Arizona Water Research Center, California Institute of Water Resources, North America Development Bank, Texas Water Resources Institute, Texas Commission of Environmental Quality, and all our volunteers are always here helping us getting the forum moving forward. So thank you for our speakers. Thank you for those that submitted their myths. They're going to present them today. And of course, we want to do this more interactive, more discussion than unusual coffee break. So if you have an idea, if you have an argument, if you want to discuss or even bring another myth to the table, just raise your hand and or put a comment in the chat. We'll follow up. So we're going to try to do this more dynamic for the sake of the event and to be able to talk about many things, not just a couple of myths. I know we're not going to be able to cover them all, but it's worth the discussion is worth it because it's very, very important to talk about facts and legends, right? So, Gabby, if you want to move, thank you. So today, I don't know if Jeff has connected or not, but he submitted a myth, and we can definitely cover it when he is around. I'm going to start introducing him. Jeff Bennett, he's an habitat restoration hydrologist of the American Bird Conservancy. He's a very usual suspect on the forum as well, very active. He has a bachelor's degree in earth science from Sulross State University and a master's in geology from Northern Arizona. He has spent 15 years as a physical scientist and hydrologist at the Big Bend National Park, where he coordinated binational river science and restoration projects, and he's very active, binationally speaking, in terms of water conservation and environmental flows. He serves on the expert science team for establishing environmental flows, as I said, for the Rio Grande, and on the Far West Texas Water Planning Group. He currently works as a conservation delivery specialist for the Rio Grande joint venture. Next, we have Dr. Juan Huerta. He's Director General of Juan Huerta Incorporation. He holds a PhD in Systems and Control Engineering from the Cleveland State University. He has experience in the study of the dynamics of integrated economic, social, and political and environmental systems, and has pioneered the design of sustainable policies for ecosystems, populations, and natural resources. He has been consultant to several institutions, including the Joint Chiefs of Staff, U.S. Department of Defense, Department of Agriculture, UNESCO, CONAGUA, INTA, and other institutions. Thank you for being here today. Paul Tashjian. Sorry, Paul, if I didn't pronounce it correctly. Thank you. He is a hydrologist at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and he has worked there since 1991. With over 26 professional experience in New Mexico, Paul's expertise includes water management and water protection for wildlife, New Mexico water law, water monitoring, aquatic habitat, and river restoration. He was a founder and coordinator of the Bosque Hydrology Group, an interagency think tank that assimilates and synthesizes information regarding the physical restoration of the Middle Rio Grande, New Mexico. Thank you, Paul, for being here. And we also have Colin McDonald. Thank you, Colin. He is a senior policy analyst for the Texas Water Foundation. He previously worked for the Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts on endangered species issues, coordinating state-funded research with stakeholder needs. Prior to that, he was a newspaper reporter focusing on environment and water issues, especially in the Rio Grande and Edwards Aquifer. He holds a bachelor's on environmental journalism from Western Washington University. Wow, Very interdisciplinary, Colin. Thank you for that. And with that, we're going to start. I'm going to read what Jeff sent. I'm going to wait for him to join in so he can discuss, or if somebody else wants to discuss the topic, you're welcome. Just raise your hand. And Eric, please make note of people that are sending questions and raising hands. Vegetation management can make new water. Managing riparian vegetation removing is often justified in terms of water savings. Yet, I am unaware of any study that shows it to be true. I was tried twice on the Pecos and no additional water made it to the gauge. Ranchers in West Texas use this myth to justify clearing entire riparian forests. This is a myth. He did not provide a source of facts for this. Probably there aren't. I don't know. If anyone has a comment on that, you're welcome to raise your hand or put the comment and we can address that in the following discussion. But meanwhile, let's go ahead, Gabby, with Dr. Huerta. And I'm going to give you, Dr. Huerta, the microphone to you so you can go over your myth.
Yes, Rosario, so thank you very much for the invitation and thank you for organizing this presentation of myths in water. And I must say that when I started to think about what I would like to discuss with all of you today, I jump in at the idea of if I need water, can I get it? And then part of what you had in your instructions is to say yes or no. And that even made it more interesting because that statement, if I need water, can I get it? Well, first of all, it's got to have, it calls for the interaction between who is asking for the water. Generally, the people that are asking for water are land developers, factory planners, is to get a big amount of water to do some bigger project. And then after I got into this, I read what's a myth. And it is widely held, it is a widely held but false belief or an idea. So again, that left me a little bit confused because sometimes this idea is an idea that is positive. You go and build a big land development and you ask for this question and somebody comes and says, yeah, we'll get you the water when you need it. And in other places, like in the area of Nuevo León, Mexico, I think that if you go and ask the same question, probably it would be a difficulty for the person that is going, your interlocutor, to say yes at all. Because obviously there are places where the drought or the reduction of the supplies in such a big thing that you cannot promise anybody to deliver the water that you would like to have. I think that you're giving like 2 minutes for this, so I'll be brief. In the original slide that I sent, I had 3 cities. I had first Mexico City, which is, of course, a very old city with in the greater area has 21 million people. Monterrey, Nuevo León, that has become a part of the this business of can I get water as of late, that has grown tremendously from 3.5 million people to 6 right now. And then the last one that I considered as part of this example is the city of St. George in Utah, that has the claim of being the human settlement growing the fastest in the United States. And that calls my attention because Utah, of course, is in the desert. And for what the articles that I've been reading on in St. George, really, they do not have the water to keep up with the development. So the report calls of a city or a settlement with 200,000 people and a very small and shrinking reservoir. And they are now looking at getting an aqueduct to bring from the Colorado River that is 140 plus miles in distance, sorry, but since I work in cubic meters, about 14,000, no, I'm sorry, about 14.6 million cubic meters of water a year, which is not a great deal of water, but that is going to be a very costly water just because of the construction of the aqueduct in between the places. So I think that this question has to be narrowed among other with who are the participants of this dialogue. So and then of course the next one is the location, the geographic location of the place that is going to be developed or overdeveloped, like you can say that about Mexico City, that has the city 9.5 million people, and the whole entire valley about 21 million people. I can leave it at this and answer or establish a dialogue with anybody that would like to ask questions. And why did I tackle or try to tackle this myth?
Thank you, Juan, very much. Does anyone has a comment, an argument, an addition, something that you want to compliment? I see Saul.
Mhm.
In large projects, it is common to think that water can certainly be obtained, but at what cost? Economic, social, environmental? Yeah, we usually don't think about those costs,
Okay.
right?
Well, I guess that you can add all of those costs. All right, the environment, without a doubt, the cost, and simply the fact that the water that exists is usually groundwater, and it is so polluted and so contaminated with arsenic and other heavy minerals that to try to use it for human consumption, if it's going to be in accordance to norms, is going to be very, very expensive. And also it's got a limit because in some areas, which I really would like to point them, but in the central plateau of Mexico, there are areas that that they are drilling wells at more than 1,000 meters of depth, utilizing pumps like the ones that you use to bring out petroleum, and of course, first and foremost, there is the cost there, but then there is what is it that you're going to get as far as volumes of water or flows of water out of the cost of doing that type of drilling. And the third point here is for how long, and that is something that very few hydrogeologists, friends of mine, have been able to tell me how long can you really estimate that a particular well or an area of wells can survive. And of course, that depends also the rate at which you're extracting the water from the wells.
Thank you. Thank you, Juan. If there's any other comment, we can definitely address it at the end. Let's go ahead with the next myth for today, Gabby. Paul, do you want to take the lead now?
Yes, if you could, I'd like to share my screen. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. I'm Paul Tashjian. I'm actually with Audubon Southwest these days. I'm the Director of Freshwater Conservation. My question that I'm trying to address is, does an emergent riparian forest consume more water than the previous non-vegetated condition? Similar to what Jeff's myth was about, I think. So the location of the part of the Rio Bravo, Rio Grande that I'm talking about today is just south of Albuquerque, New Mexico. And it includes 53 river miles of the Rio Grande from Los Lunas to Santa Acacia, New Mexico. The river channel in this part of the Rio Grande was modified in the 1950s to convey flows efficiently. This is what the river channel looked like from about 1950 to around 2005, 2010. The channel is 200 meters wide by design, with armored banks and a disconnected floodplain. This is what the river channel looks like today. Since 2010, the river has formed an inset floodplain within the former channel footprint. What is remarkable about this new floodplain is that it is vegetated with a new riparian forest that is comprised almost entirely of native woody vegetation, including coyote willow, cottonwood trees, and willow trees. This river is now a miniature version of itself. We call it here in New Mexico El Rito Grande. And it is a vegetated, it's a miniature version of its former self with many of the qualities of the historic Rio Grande. Here is flooded habitat from 2019. Concerns have been raised by water management agencies that the young riparian forest is increasing water consumption. Many water managers are suggesting that we need to now mow the young forest in order to reduce this new water consumption. Simple calculations suggest water consumption has been reduced. The young floodplain and forest are replacing what was previously open water. A water budget suggests a reduction in water consumption on the order of 10 to 20%. And these are using numbers from UMass World Wildlife Fund effort, the report card for potential evapotranspiration, which is the maximum plant could consume, and then using those with open water evaporation numbers from Open Water ET, and just plugging those into acres. The narrower concentrated flows increase water conveyance at most flows, improving downstream delivery of water. Concerns over high flow levee impacts and water stranding are valid and need to be addressed. Mowing riparian vegetation can also lead to resprouts of coyote willow and salt cedar that often consume as much as the trees before they were cleared. Mowing riparian vegetation leads to scrappy, weed-rich, poor habitat that favors invasive species. Mowing operations are very costly and require long-term financial resources and commitment. And then just some next steps that we're looking into for addressing this issue is we're using OpenET, but also wanting to get some higher spatial resolution data. And we need to be looking at stuff back in 2000, 2005, so the previous condition before the bars and floodplain developed. And we're also doing some hydraulic modeling through the state, is doing some that can be used to better quantify conveyance efficiencies and locations where surgical dirt work is needed for flood control. So finally, just in conclusion, I'll say that the Rio Grande in central New Mexico has improved its habitats during a period of extended drought. And to me, this is an unanticipated and astonishing occurrence. So this is during drought, the habitat's getting better. Now there's a push to once again punish the river by embarking upon a large-scale vegetation management program. I suggest a different approach should be taken to managing the Rio Grande in central New Mexico. Let it be. Okay. Thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's protecting itself. It looks like it's protecting itself, right? Anyone? I mean, I had lots of comments, but I don't want to monopolize the conversation. Of course, I want people to talk. Does anyone has a comment, observation, argument, something? You want to raise your hand? Don't be shy. Juan, you have a comment? Go ahead. You're muted. You're muted. You are muted. Let me see if I can take you mute. I'll mute. Okay, I'll do it for you. I think I can. Okay, go ahead. We can hear you. We can hear. Go ahead, Dr. Huerta.
Oh, here. Okay. Yeah, my question to Paul is, have you developed any kind of a pilot project or one section of the river, so not to incur into the expense of going all out to try to clear up or let the vegetation in the river, also a place that you can take some measurements? Because I imagine that also the flow of the river varies a lot from year to year and time. So you're subjected to a number of variables there that have to be brought into consideration to see what will be the best policy or alternative. So is there a pilot project being developed for that?
Thank you. Yeah, I think this model that we're developing is a hydraulic model that the state's developing, but we're engaged with it as well as others. I think that will help answer it. We definitely have pilot sites out there, but we're certainly, another thing that's sort of interesting about this is that the endangered species bird, the southwestern male flycatchers, has moved into this habitat in gangbusters with over 80 nests there. So it's kind of like we're not suggesting as a nonprofit Audubon, we're not suggesting to test removing vegetation, but we are suggesting that it can be managed, and there may be some stuff that needs to be done. So we'll having some select stuff for that. But there's no pilot study now, I don't think, to actually try to remove vegetation and test to see if that was effective for water budget or not.
So my other question is that in the first slide that you showed, the river was quite wide, and now it's just a trickle of water. So what would be, if you were asked, what would be the future of the river, or at least of that section of the river, the way it is today as compared to several years back, and if it continues to be, if the vegetation continues?
Yeah, that's something that definitely needs to be watched. I think that what we think that it's coming to some sort of equilibrium in its current state, and largely in response to lower flows and drought. So it's sort of adjusting and becoming a mini river, but it definitely will be monitored and needs to be monitored so there isn't increased vegetation. That's what I'm saying about the issues of flood control are valid, and understanding, that the vegetation encroachment and managing that where needed, but selectively and not just doing wholesale clearing. And that's what's been suggested, that we just embark upon a big mowing operation because the trees are taking the water.
Okay. Thank you.
Colin. Thank you. Colin, you have a comment.
Well, yeah, Paul, thank you so much. He addressed it at the end of just the flooding issue and how do you keep it, right? Because the natural progression of this is that it then it silts in, and then the river decides to take a course other than what the levees want it to do.
I can't hear Colin, but I don't know if others can.
Oh, I unmuted myself.
Yes, I can hear him.
Okay. No worries.
Well, make sure you have muted your original audio. Are you on the English channel? Yeah. Okay. Okay. If there are no more comments on this myth, Colin, now that you're on the speaker, do you want to go ahead? Gabby, do you want to share the presentation for Colin Smith? Go ahead, Colin.
So yeah, outside the national parks, to assume the Rio Bravo is not a pretty enough place, or it's too dangerous to travel. So I want to challenge this myth with my next little presentation.
Go ahead. You should be able
Okay.
to share.
Here we go. Just a second, excuse me. Okay. Before I give this presentation, or a little caveat, very aware I'm speaking as a white, able-bodied male, and there's all kinds of different definitions of safety, but what I'm arguing here is that the Rio Bravo is no different than any other river. So to be very direct, is it safe? Yes. Lots of people have traveled the Rio Grande, / the entire border. In 2018, Tenny and Claire walked the whole thing, and with no incident. Keith Bowden traveled from Juarez to Boca Chica, no problem. These guys in 1977 from Dartmouth College traveled the whole river with no incident. I traveled from Stony Pass to Boca Chica in 2014, 2015 with no incident. And on that trip, to further argument that the river is a great place to travel, for all the people I met along the way, this is the Bargain family. They have a ranch just upstream from Candelaria. They weekend there. This is Pablo Garza. He either still is or was the manager of Amistad and works on the river every day. This is Alina Gonzalez and her father, Javier. They fish on the river every weekend. It's where they bond. This is Antonio Andrea of Acuna. He's been there. He's talking about all the big floods that came through, which definitely were a danger. But he spends all kinds of time down the river. This is Tony Casaneda, and he's one of those people that loves to barbecue. And so he will set up his, he dries the pecan trees for years before he actually then starts the smoker. So his meat is like a 4-year process. Does all of it on the banks of the Rio Grande. He's never had an issue. This is Kay Cunningham. She also owns property on the Rio Grande. She's had issues with people crossing, and leaving garbage and things on her property, but never a safety issue. This is Philip Salazar of the Kickapoo Nation, also lives along the Rio Grande. She's never had an issue. This is Paul Gayton. He's a lawyer down in McAllen. He paddles it on a fairly regular basis down the valley. Believe it or not, this is the Rio Grande Valley. There's a huge limestone shelf that sticks out into the river there, and it looks very much like the hill country. It's a great place to paddle. This is Othello Brand, pretty well-known guy down the valley, spends a lot of time on the side of the river. There are incidences that he has with people messing with equipment, and but that's no different than you'd have at any industrial site or issue. This is Francisco Asquieta. He works for the Boundary Water Commission and lives on the Rio Grande, basically doing dredging 24/7. It doesn't have an issue with being on the river itself. This and last one, this is Ramon Ramirez. He works with the Delta Lake Irrigation District. Same deal. He gets stuff sucked into his pipes, but he's perfectly calm being on the river itself. Now, there are obviously real dangers. There are some really nasty dams, especially down low, that have caused problems, but I would argue that is not unique to the Rio Grande, Rio Bravo. There's this cane, which is just amazingly solid, is it just taking over massive places of the river, and maybe it's on the decline, but you'll get ticks from it, but it's not really a threat. There are these guys. Why anybody needs a 900 horsepower boat when the water is 2 feet deep in most places or less is beyond me. And they're bored most of the time. These guys do, they're everywhere. And I mean, this is where it gets interesting on if you're, there's border issues, certainly. And I would never argue that, being a migrant, and being at a disadvantage is a safe place, but the dangers of the Rio Grande in particular aren't any different than what they face in in the vast majority of the other places they have to travel through. Here they do stop you a lot and talk to you a lot when you're traveling the river, but it's not it's a time issue, not a safety issue. And so my final commitment or my final argument is that I brought all of these people to the river to go paddle, and they all had a good time. They were surprised by it, but it was lovely. It can get cold, but that again is not not something that's unique to the river. And that's my presentation.
Thank you, Colin. Those were excellent photographs. And there are a couple of messages here in the chat related to the safety issue on the Rio Grande. This is in Spanish. I'm going to read it in Spanish. I hope this is okay with the translators. Or should I change my channel? Should I change my channel? Probably I have to. Let me just change it.
Yeah, you should change it.
Muy interesante el mito de Colin. En mi experiencia, quizás por la cultura en comunidades rurales de México, como Boquillas, San Vicente y otras un poco más lejos del río, tienen miedo, y esto tiene que ver con el conocimiento de comportamiento anual de crecientes y temporadas secas. Para muchos de ellos no se trata de una atracción, el entrar al río, sino una necesidad. Leeré otra, esta también es en español, por lo tanto voy a abordarla de una vez, antes de regresar al canal en inglés. Hola, buenas tardes. El río es hermoso, pero acceder a él no es viable en la mayor parte de él. Del lado mexicano es restringido el acceso por la inseguridad y del borde americano es restringido por la patrulla fronteriza o agencias de seguridad. ¿Algún comentario sobre esto, Colin? Y voy al canal de inglés.
Should I respond?
Go ahead, Colin.
Yeah, I think the perceptions of the river, it's for Javier's point. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's fascinating that both sides, risk is always a perceived thing, and how people view the river. And I think it is amazing that on both sides for so long, the river hasn't been seen as a recreational, quality of life enhancement. You can see it in, the difference between Juarez's side of the river and El Paso's side of the river. And it's amazing how quickly, and maybe safety is one of those things that just, it's very difficult to inject rationale on it because it's such an emotional based thing. But yeah, up and down the river on both sides, the perceptions of the river are so diverse. And the myth that I think that there's a good argument that the myth that it's dangerous is definitely a myth. And yeah, a big part of that I think is acts to Lopez's comment. Yeah, it's not treated as a benefit by most of the communities that are along it. So it just perpetuates itself.
Yeah, the river has to deal with a lot of issues at the same time. Most of them are not even related to water. Anyway, thank you, Colin, for that. We have another myth that was submitted by Bill. I know that Bill was not able to come. He emailed it to us, but we have it here, so we can share it and we can discuss this openly. In the Rio Grande Basin, under flood irrigation, can all applied water percolation below the crop root zone be considered groundwater recharge? And I know that Alfonso, I know you're in there. I saw you. So you probably want to comment on this, or if you haven't planned to comment on this,
Yes,
I'll
I
ask
am
you
here.
to
I
comment on
am
this.
here.
Thank you, Alfonso, because I want your opinion on this. The answer is no. And this is the explanation, and I'm going to read it to you. First, the source of irrigation water matters. If from surface water, yes, water leaching past the root zone could be considered recharge if it makes it to the groundwater, since the water represents new water to the groundwater system. Makes sense. But if the irrigation water is pumped from groundwater, it should be considered return flow, since it is water that was pumped originally from the groundwater and only what is not used is being returned. Thus, flood irrigation using surface water is efficient, but is not efficient when using groundwater. Drip irrigation will be more efficient when groundwater is the source. Second, the transmission of water percolating past this root zone to groundwater is not perfect. There is potential for lateral flow before reaching the groundwater and perhaps transpiration by non-target plants. These losses are normally considered relatively small, but could be significant. I think this is a very, very well explained the concept, but still, if there's any comment, I would like Alfonso. Thank you for signing out today, and thank you for being here. And if it's okay with you, I would like your opinion on this myth as well.
Well, yeah.
Come on, I put you in spot. I'm sorry to put you in spot.
Short answer. Very, very short answer. Yes, it can be considered groundwater recharge. But that is extremely short answer. I don't know if we have time to go into the mechanics and the dynamics of the unsaturated zone, and the root, whatever. It's very complicated because the question is really good, actually. So I would say yes to start with, but it will require a little bit more of thinking, because of what it says later. New water to the groundwater system. It is not new water. It's the same water. It's being renewed and it's being brought up. And at the end of the day, both surface water and groundwater, as long as they reach each other on the groundwater level, not only in the unsaturated zone, it's the same water. So I would say yes. Drip irrigation, it says, is more efficient when groundwater is the source. One of the assumptions here, and the transmission of water percolating past the root zone to groundwater is not perfect. Definitely, because there are issues of pressure. It goes up, it's negative, and then it goes down, and it depends where. Also, temperature plays a role. Permeability of the soil plays a role. There are many factors. So I don't want to go into many details here, technical details, but short answer will be yes.
So you are challenging the myth.
No, I'm answering to your question, Rosario.
So if we ask if groundwater can be considered as recharge when groundwater is the source of irrigation, your answer is yes.
Yes.
Okay, or it could be it all depends, but initially, yes.
Yeah, well, look, what happens in other countries where they take very, very seriously, the flood irrigation, and they have even good by good, drop by drop irrigation, such as in Israel and other semi-arid countries. At the end of the day, it's considered renewable water because it goes back into the recharge of into the groundwater. However, it doesn't always go there, as it's explained in the very long text underneath. If it doesn't, then obviously it moves away it doesn't charge or it evapotranspire, because it depends on how deep the unsaturated zone is. You put me, Rosario. I'm not the only expert here. I mean, there are many others. Ask them. I would say yes.
Okay.
May I weigh in on that, Rosario?
Go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, well, I would partly agree with Alfonso. And what we've seen in the area, which we call Perdóname, Tejanos, what we call the Lower Rio Grande, below Elephant Butte, is that that there's a lot of capture of new water that is then pumped, and the lateral drains in those areas then recapture that water, as Alfonso was describing. It occurs in other countries, and in fact, they assume 20 to 30% reuse in those areas. So this is what's happening, and the myth that flood irrigation, which I labored under that myth for a long time, in those areas, the canopy from the pecan orchards is so efficient that, in fact, flood irrigation can be fairly efficient, and in fact does a better job of flushing out salts than drip irrigation. So there's a lot of moving parts here. It is considered a reused water, and they count on it as part of the operating agreement. So in that context, it should be considered not necessarily new water, but reused water. And so reducing the sources of salts, and that includes application of gypsums for better drainage, as well as fertilizers that enhance release of salts and whatnot, is a big part of what we're looking at in these places. But it's still reusable water, and that water can be ultimately treated and whatnot. So I would still contend it's usable water, but salinity buildup and nitrate fertilizers, nutrients, and salinity buildup is a huge issue, and it's something we're tackling in other places.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you for stepping in. Let me see. There was another comment here from Carmen. Carmen, do you wanna have it live? Do you wanna comment this on live?
Sí, gracias. Bueno, mi comentario respecto al mito del recarga, creo que pues es un poco complicado comentar cuándo sí es recarga y cuándo no es recarga, dado que para definir que sí es recarga se debe tener un poco de indicadores de que el viaje desde superficie venga de donde venga la fuente, llámese de riego o otras fuentes como escurrimientos, pudieran llegar a la zona saturada para considerarse recarga. Entonces, yo soy como muy escéptica para decidir cuándo sí es mito de que decir que no o cuándo es decir que sí. Tendríamos que tener más mecanismos para ese sentido, y ese es mi comentario.
Thank you, Carmen. Yes, that's actually, it all depends, as everything. Actually, is there anyone else that wants to share a myth that is not being talked here? I mean, we've been talking about a couple of things, but I love the myths related to the 1944 treaty, but I don't want to address them because they're just too, I don't want to bring that discussion here right now, but Jerry is asking, why is salinity of groundwater increasing? I guess that goes back to your comment, Randy. It depends, right?
It does depend, and what we're seeing is that it's a combination of three things. One, application of saline waters, so it's source mitigation. mobilizing of salts in the soil zone, soil amendments such as gypsum, and then finally mobilizing salts through the pumpage of the groundwater itself. And sometimes those are mixed water, so a lot of wells get scaling, precipitation of calcium and magnesium carbonates on the screens of the wells and whatnot. And that's a mixing of a reduced and oxidized water, but a lot of that also gets onto the fields and becomes saline groundwater. So there's a lot of different sources, plus evaporation, of course.
Thank you. The other one that I know that Sam wanted to share today, he wasn't able to join us today, but the other one was, and I really want your opinions on this because I don't have an answer. It is out there. It's very strong. Everybody's talking about it after the signing of the Minute 323 on the potential desalination of the Mar de Cortés. And desalination itself as problem solving for everything, as water augmentation, as you know, it's been sold as the future of water availability for the Rio Colorado, and it's all over the place in the discussions at binational level. So I want to hear your thoughts. If anyone has a thought on that, it would be great to hear what you think, because in my case, I think it's part myth and part true. It all depends, of course, but the way it's out there, the discussions is kind of the solution, right? This is the solution to scarcity. Let's start desalination. And well, California has its own experience on that. Mexico has its own take on that, and Arizona has its own, interests in the same Port Sonora. So, and Texas has its own experience and very successful experience as well, in other parts of the world as well. But I want your opinion on if this is this the solution? Is this the way forward? Sounds like a test.
I'd like to jump in if I may. There's no free lunch, and there's probably with conjunctive use. One of the things that we've seen in everywhere from India to the Salt River Valley and Phoenix and whatnot is that salinity is a huge issue, including the crop tolerances for salinity, and that being able to use either a lower salinity surface water or lower salinity groundwater or whatnot. So that I think this is just going to have to be part of the portfolio of sources, but there's no free lunch. There's going to have to be some need to find a disposal of the hypersaline residuals left over from desalination. The one exciting thing that's just happened, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's a professor at New Mexico Tech that has just patented, and they're developing, actually we're getting a couple of demonstration sites together for what's called forward osmosis. And so it has a much wider range of salinities that it can deal with, and requires a lot less energy than reverse osmosis. So there may be some other ways to do desalination that will make some of this more feasible. But again, there's still a waste stream, and there's no free lunch on dealing with that aspect of it. And ultimately there has, land use has to be curtailed. And that's what we're looking at places like the Central Valley, where there's probably over 850,000 acres of too much land use. So really limiting land use and the demand for water is part of the sustainability, and you can't just keep making good water out of bad. So I'll stop with that, but those are some thoughts.
Thank you, Randy. Josh, thank you for joining. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'm sorry I'm late because I was at another meeting, but just raced into the office and
Josh,
turned.
yeah. Hi.
I was excited to be here. To follow through on there's no free
We
lunch.
can't hear you, Josh. Are you in the English channel? Make sure you are in the English channel and mute original audio.
In a language at all. I was not in one language.
Good.
Okay.
Good.
I'm glad to be here. I was at something else, but I raced back in and turned on the event. So I'm very excited and appreciative. And to follow through on what Dr. Hansen was saying about there being no free lunch. I think that in addition to the issue of the concentrates, which is a serious issue, that we're going to experience a wave or a transition of costs from easier and cheaper water to more costly and what I call more difficult water, which is what that takes more processing. And we can do it. We have those technologies, not only desalination, but direct potable reuse and other technology, long distance importation, which is not a sophisticated technology, but is very expensive. But that's going to create a cost wave through various segments of society. So think of the agricultural sector is going to be hit by increasingly expensive water. Well, lots of agriculture doesn't make as much economic sense if the water is much more expensive. Likewise, urban consumers, and this is where I've worked just published last year an article in PLOS One with Alex Mayer, and we looked at the cost impact on poor consumers in El Paso of El Paso Water Utilities' future plans for new supplies, or many of which are these heavily processed supplies or imported supplies, processed and imported because they import salty water and then process it. So, we will have water, but we're going to have water at a price. And that price is going to impact various sectors. I'm always concerned about the most vulnerable sector. That's why we were looking at poor consumers. So I think we need to think about, yes, it isn't just a question of can we have water, but can we have water at what price?
Yeah, who's going to be able to pay for that? Thank you, Josh, for those comments. Now, I do have another one here. For you, unless am I missing? Okay, Carmen, I'm gonna share your comment first. You wanna share it live, Carmen? Let's just go live if it's okay with you.
Adelante, Rosario, es que voy manejando aquí, si lo puedes leer.
Okay. I'm gonna translate so I don't have to change channels. I consider that all the action of all these actions related to new water sources are going to have an impact somehow. What are the effects? It's a challenge that we need to think about, because up until today son costos y efectos que no. We only think about price, probably, but not other associated costs, what might be, environmental and land use and sustainability. And I would add, if it's okay, I am a strong believer that bringing water from the outside of the system is, in the long term, might not be necessarily sustainable. In the case, for example, of the idea of bringing water to Arizona and California from the Mar de Cortés on the Mexico side, it ignores a lot of things. Ignores that Mexico also needs water. Second, it ignores that there's never going to be enough water. I mean, I think it's based on the assumption that if we get that amount of water, we're going to be okay. I think that's a myth. I think the amounts of water, a number, it's just to deal with a number, it's a myth, because we're never going to have enough water. Enough is never going to be enough, because we're always want to need more water or best quality of the water. So I think that the idea of bringing water from the outside just makes us more vulnerable instead of dealing with what we have, on our own system. It's challenging, it's more costly probably, or it's easier for you to reach out. I mean, that's what happens on on the Mexico side, trying to bring water from kilometers away. Even Juarez, I mean, is bringing water from the neighboring aquifer as well, without, doing the ABC, right? First, I think desalination is kind of in the WC kind of strategy, and we haven't dealt with the ABC first. So that's my take, if I am allowed to talk about desalination on that end. And there's another 2 comments here from Jerry. Most water is for agriculture here. Is there a long-term approach to replace water-intensive crops with less intensive ones, vegetables, for example, as an alternative to piping in remote water? Yeah, that might be one. Predictions of household water affordability under conditions of climate change, demographic growth, and fresh groundwater depletion in Southeast U.S. city indicates increasing burdens on the poor. Yeah. Super high energy demand plus the discharge of high concentrate of salts. Yeah, I guess all those factors have to be taken into thinking about something that is very costly, and not just in terms of price or money, but in terms of everything else. And it makes you more vulnerable, I think, to your own system. Anyway, is there anyone else that you want to? I have a very good one. and this is completely. Let's talk about policy now. Groundwater and the 1944 treaty. The myth is we need a new treaty to address groundwater in the border. The challenge is we do not need a new treaty. The treaty has its own instruments to make it happen without revising the treaty. As we have seen how the Colorado River has been reallocated under 323 minute. So any comments on that? Any argue? Oh, Randy. Hold on, Randy. Hold on. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Well, briefly, I respectfully think that there are still some issues with the treaty. In particular, the Treaty of 1906 has drought conditions for American deliveries, but the Treaty of 1944 resets the clock on Mexico deliveries every time they're achieved, as opposed to there being a drought contingency, and the 5-year window is just incorrect. And we, Dr. Entry and I, in our paper and our work, show that that's incorrect. It really should be an 8 to 15-year window. So there's no drought contingency for Mexico's deliveries on the Rio Bravo, and the groundwater thing isn't in there at all. So I think there are some additional minutes that could be amended to I love the fact that we have a dynamic treaty, so I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but we could use some new bathwater.
Yes, I think the treaty has its own flexibility and adaptability instruments, legal instruments to make it work, right? It's just a matter of doing it. Okay, yeah, we're on the same page. Carmen also commented. Let me quickly move to Spanish. Un mito que siempre se da es que la escasez se soluciona siempre con la incorporación de nuevas fuentes. Very good one. Cuando hasta ahora no han solucionado en ningún lado. La solución es gestionar la demanda y, de ser posible, de forma local, ya que no hay oferta ilimitada e infinita. True. Fact. That is very, very true. I'm going back to English. I agree with Carmen. Using water from the ocean is just doing business as usual. This is not addressing the real problem that is changing the way we are doing things, but only buffering those with more sources. Yeah, and I think it also depends on the case. I mean, the El Paso water has done a very good job, I think, on reducing its dependency to groundwater by desalination. But I think it's a very particular case that has worked well. I think it works. It's a very good technology, expensive, but in some cases it does make sense. But it doesn't make sense in all of the cases as a, let's just desalinate and we're going to be okay. Because that's not what the problem is originally. And the city of El Paso has done many more things, not just desalination. I mean, a lot of conservation strategies, a lot of more holistic planning water use of the region. I think that's what has made a difference at the end on its dependency to groundwater. I don't want to monopolize the conversation. I'm having a lot of fun here, guys, but really, who else wants to join in for the discussion? Another myth that comes into your mind? This is the time we're recording this and we're publishing this, so this is good information for the people out there that is watching, especially for border communities. Let me see if I have something here. Randy, go ahead.
A brief one, and that is that a lot of people don't seem to think that wells are multi-aquifer wells are part of conjunctive use, and they really are. They contribute to recharge as well as to depletion. And what we've seen in places like the Central Valley, because so many of the wells are screened across many aquifers, that we see 17% of the outflow is actually also inflow into deeper aquifers through these wells. And it varies anywhere from 7% during the end of the growing season to 21% during the non-growing season. So there can be a lot of wellbore flow that actually helps contribute to recharge of the deeper aquifers. And sometimes that's the only way the deeper aquifers get recharged. So the wells, multi-aquifer wells, are part of conjunctive use.
Thank you. Thank you, Randy. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And see you soon for the next one.